Welcome to another episode of KinCasts, where we explore the joys of connecting with loved ones through private podcasts. I'm your host, David Beckmeyer, and I want to help you capture the magic of your family stories.
There was a day I was walking down the hallway and they had these, kind of industrial clocks that you used to have in schools and stuff. And they were hanging out the wall and it had a face on either side so everyone knew what time it was. And I walked in one day and the one clock I looked at and it was running backwards. I had the second hand and it was going the wrong way. And I stood there and looked at it for a while. And there was a cleaning woman that was coming out of the room. I said, "Come here and look at this." And she kind of looked up and she looked at it for a while. I was like, "Don't be messing with me like this." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm sorry. But then I went to get Sally. I said, "Come on, grab your IV stand. Let's go for a little walk." And we walked around just to show her. And it made her laugh. And those little things become so critical. Some non-medical distraction becomes so critical to the whole treatment process that, you've got to spend some time looking for them.
That's Jim Cooper, a man who truly understands the importance of family moments. Jim's worn many hats in his life, from radio DJ to entrepreneur, and even a movie critic. But throughout his diverse career, his family has always been his constant. Jim recently faced a challenge that brought his family even closer. He became a caregiver for his wife during her cancer treatment. This experience inspired Jim to write the not-so-little book of cancer caregiving, a heartfelt guide that not only offers practical advice for caregivers, but also reminds us of the power of preserving precious memories with loved ones. Jim Cooper, thanks so much for making time for our show.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad to be invited. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, so in your, I sort of saw your profile and kind of saw your story, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And you talk about that you started journaling right from the start, from the beginning of Sally's diagnosis. Is that right?
Yeah, it was the very first night of treatment, and she had to be in the hospital for each treatment, had to be there for 3 or 4 days, and I stayed in the room with her, and I'm sitting there staring at the ceiling going, I got to write about this because I'm certainly not sleeping. And so I just started writing some notes and journaling about it and posting it on social media. And it dawned on me after seeing the reaction to that this was a great way to keep in touch with family and friends without having to make 1,500 phone calls, on a daily basis. And people really appreciated, especially the family, her brothers and sisters and our kids, really appreciated the information and being able to go there and see what was going on. And, so it worked in both ways. It helped me just write about it, and then it helped everyone else, keep in touch with what was going on. There was a part of this whole journey that I hadn't thought of beforehand because you get so involved in the whole diagnosis part, which took, months and months and months. And once we got into treatment, we were absolutely fortunate enough to have my daughter live about 15 minutes away, and my sister-in-law, Sally's sister, live about 15 minutes away. And they just really stepped up. And we had 2 4-legged drooling beast monsters at the time that needed to be taken care of. And they coordinated and sometimes stayed at the house when we were in the hospital in New York, and just really stepped up to the plate and pitched in. One of the times that Sally was in treatment was kind of over the Christmas holiday. And my daughter called me and said, "Hey, we want to decorate the house for you." So they just stepped up, and we came home, and the whole outside was decorated, and they'd even put up a tree inside and put lights on it, and left us a note that we didn't decorate it because we know you guys like to. So everyone is, the one question you get is, what can I do? And one of the things in my book that I talk about is think about that, because there's a lot they can do, but you got to think about it beforehand just to say, okay, you can do this. And they don't have to be big things. They can be small things. You can do this. You can do this. That just makes everyone feel included in the whole adventure that's going on. It's a really good way to bring everyone together and have a kind of a feeling of unity behind it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely in some ways one of the hardest questions, right? I mean, because you're in the middle of this and you're emotional and you got your own thing going on, and people say, well, what can I do? And sometimes you don't know the answer to that. But
Yeah.
having that thought of ahead of time is actually a good idea, because you can only do so much. And so any little thing you can do, does help.
And that's the biggest single feeling that most people have, including caregivers. It's just that feeling of helplessness creeps up, and it's just like you're just kind of sitting and watching going on. You can't fix it. That's up to the doctors and the nurses and everything else. They do their magic. So it's a tough battle when you start feeling that way.
Uh-huh. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So it seems like when you were going through this, the caregiver sort of support what seemed maybe not as prevalent or different. What can you say about that and how that has changed?
Yeah, at the time, and this is back in 2014, caregivers were just starting to get the recognition that, hey, the stress and the wear and tear on them is not much different than what the patient is going through. Two different sets of things, but so all of a sudden caregivers were starting to get some attention as to, okay, this is how this is going to work. And one of the biggest single things that I learned as a caregiver and in part to other caregivers is you have to take time to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself and you fall by the wayside, now you're really up a creek. So, self-care becomes a real big thing. And just take the time for yourself in little increments just to keep yourself healthy. Of course, the big thing they tell you is get enough sleep and eat the right things. Well, that ain't happening. I got news for you. That's not going to happen when you're not sleeping and the best meal you can think of is to sit down with a half gallon of ice cream and eat the whole thing. But you have to be aware of those things and not do them and do the best that you can as you walk through it.
Yeah. And there's even almost like a guilt factor a little bit, like you're almost guilty if you take care of yourself, and you have to kind of get over that. It's like the, put your oxygen mask on first kind of thing.
It's interesting. There was another caregiver in the hospital the woman that had flown from Switzerland, and her mom was going through almost the same kind of treatment Sally was, and almost on the same schedule because we kept running into each other in the hallways in the hospital thing. And there was one day I went out and saw her leaning up against the wall with her head down, and I knew what that look was all about. It was just she'd had enough. And so I just went up to her and said, what's going on? She's like, I can't do this anymore. And so I gave her a hug, and, she cried. But one of the biggest things she was fighting against was that feeling of guilt. Just like, why can I do this and this person can't? Or, why I'm not helping enough. I must be doing something wrong. And that feeling of guilt is very prevalent throughout this whole journey. It's just like that gets back into self-care. This you've got to recognize that these feelings are going to come up, and that's okay. It's normal. It's part of the whole process.
Yeah. Well, and even though, given everything, did the humor ever play sort of a role in some of that?
It has to. I mean, you have to. After about 2 treatments, we kind of realized that there's 2 ways to approach this thing. Either positive or negative. You're either going to be optimistic about it or you're going to be angry and bitter about it. And the people that are optimistic about it tend to do better than being angry about it. I was having a really bad day, and everyone has bad days. The patient's going to have bad days. The caregiver's going to have bad days. The family members are going to have bad days. And it's just a part of the process, and they don't last forever. But one of the things, I was walking around the hospital, and just really in a grumpy, horrible mood. Got on the elevator, and I heard from out in the hallway, "Hold the elevator, please." And I thought, oh, okay, fine, whatever. And I hold the elevator, and in comes this woman in her 30s, and she's pushing a wheelchair, and there's 12, 13-year-old kid in this wheelchair, completely bald, had lost all her hair, hooked up to an IV drip. And I kind of looked at her and said, "How you doing?" And she's like, "I got one more treatment and then I'm done." And I'm like, "You just stay tough." And that just changed my perspective on the day. Whatever I was grousing about or upset about didn't matter anymore. I mean, it just, those little things you look for to change your perspective. And sometimes they just show up without even having to look for them. And those are the ones you get most grateful about.
Mm-hmm. So, since you're across the Rubicon about how to, sort of get this podcast kind of stuff and get the tech figured out and all that, I wonder if you have any sort of maybe a quick challenge or exercise that people could think about for how they might be able to start capturing some of their either caregiving stories or just any sort of stories within their family.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. Interestingly enough, I've become an ancestry freak, and I've created family trees that go everywhere. But so that's, one way to do it from a historical perspective, so there's that type of thing. You could make short videos on your phone, just set your phone up and just talk for 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long you want to, and just create a video library of events that go on. And maybe sometime down the road, you could edit the whole thing together and make a presentation. You don't have to, but, just any way that you can get your thoughts out, whether it's video, audio, on paper, whatever it happens to be. For me, and I know it has been for a lot of people, there's a great catharsis in that, being able to talk about it when there's no one else around to talk to at that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, looking back on your experience, I mean, is there anything that kind of stands out as something where using a service like KinCast might have been interesting to capture, some of that story?
The thought that occurs to me, and this is kind of what drew me to your podcast, is that, what a great way to capture the latest news or the latest happenings or the latest events in a podcast. It's a great way, whether you do it on a daily basis or a weekly basis, that's up to whatever you want to do. But I think that's a great way. And even not necessarily a podcast, but even, just like a Zoom call or something like that, to get everyone together and talk and keep people informed of what's going on. I think it's a great way to not only keep them informed, but like we were talking before, including them in the process as well, so they can feel like they're in the middle of it and don't feel like they're on the outside wondering what to do. It's bringing everyone together that's the key thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know I talked to a lot of folks that are sort of intimidated by the technology of it. And if you're recording stuff that your family's interested in, you just have to realize that it doesn't have to be, a 60 minutes kind of quality show or something like that. They want to hear those stories, and you can just record it on your phone and that'll be fine. Right.
I mean, yeah, you said that perfectly. It doesn't have to be a 60 minutes quality thing. And, if people are really stuck on the technology, do what all of us homeowners do when something needs fixing. Go to YouTube and search on videos on how to get things. There's tons of videos on how to start a podcast and how to deal with Zoom and how to, the wealth of information that's out there for free is staggering. So if you're that adventurous about it, you can really dig into it. If not, you're absolutely right. Just record something on your phone. It doesn't have to be broadcast quality. It's just for the family.
Yeah. So tell us the name of the book and the website one more time, Jim.
The name of the book is The Not So Little Book of Cancer Caregiving. Be a caregiver warrior and keep your sanity, because that's what it did for me. And it's available on Amazon, so you can just go out there and order a copy. And I've had a lot of great feedback on it so far, so it's cool.
That's great. Well, Jim Cooper, I really appreciate you making the time. And yeah, thanks again, Jim, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of KinCast. I hope you've been inspired to capture the magic of your family stories and share them through the power of private podcasts. For more resources and inspiration, visit kincasts.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review and subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, remember every story matters and your family story deserves to be heard. Take care and happy storytelling.